On today's episode, the Jeff Blashill era is off to a fast start. I'll get into all the key takeaways from the first 2 days of Blackhawks training camp.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome on in to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Can go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey to get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also just a quick reminder to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. 100% free, won't cost you anything, and is the best way to show support and help me in growing my channel. Thank you all very much in advance. But happy Saturday, Blackhawks fans. How good does it feel to have Blackhawks hockey back in our lives? The opening 2 days of training camp have now wrapped up, and there are loads of takeaways to talk through. So let's not waste any more time and go ahead and get right into it. The first thing I wanted to begin with and talk about on today's show stems from what I touched on in the last episode that I dropped, where I outlined all the key storylines and position battles to be watching throughout training camp. Some of you may remember the number one storyline that I outlined. The first thing that I mentioned was Jeff Blashill's impact and tendencies. How is he going to go about his business in developing both the young players, helping them take their next steps, while also squeezing the most out of these veterans to help them make the team better and win more games this year, how to kind of do both of those things at the same time, while also just how he's going to run things as the Blackhawks' new head coach. And while it's only been 2 days, Blackhawks fans, you got to take all this stuff with a grain of salt, right? I've been super impressed with how Jeff Blashill has handled everything both on the ice and off of it. First, there was no getting back into the swing of things feeling around the opening day of training camp. No. Jeff Blashill had these guys working right from the opening whistle, and there was just a different level of intensity that he provided. And just, 2, 3, 4 minutes in to that opening practice session, he was already yelling, hitting the whistles, dropping some F-bombs, and making these guys do conditioning drills when things weren't being ran as smoothly or as crisply as he expected. He wasn't afraid to put his foot down and tell the guys, hey, we're better than this, even if it is the first time we're all skating together in a handful of months. And I was just really impressed with that, with how Blashill immediately raised the bar, set the tone, let the level of expectations be known that, hey, this is what it's going to look like on a day-to-day basis. And if we're not hitting that level, you guys are going to be skating because of it. So I've just really loved the intensity and the seriousness that Jeff Blashill has brought along with him. And then I also thought he's reflected that, or he did reflect that when speaking with the media on Thursday as well. And just, again, how serious and the purpose behind everything that he does. It's just different to what we've seen in that position for the Blackhawks ever since they fired Joel Quenneville in November of 2018. And I think another thing, what else has to do with that, Blackhawks fans, is the experience that Jeff Blashill has. Well, he's only been an NHL head coach once. It was for 7 years with the Red Wings. And listen, I know the Red Wings didn't do a whole lot of winning under Blashill. They were going through a rebuild at that point in time, but 7 years gives you, a big sample size and a huge time frame to kind of figure out what works, what doesn't, how you want to go about your operations. And then Blashill also, of course, just spent the last 3 years as an assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Lightning under John Cooper, who's one of the best, if not the best, head coach in the entire NHL, the longest tenured head coach currently in the entire league. And I feel like that was just, again, a good experience for Blashill being around a winning organization, a really highly regarded head coach who I'm sure knows how a practice should be ran, knows how things have to click out there. And I'm doing a little bit of assuming here, but I do just feel like Blashill's time with Tampa Bay, in addition to having previous experience as an NHL head coach and just being around this level for such a long period of time, he knows how these things have to go in order for the team to be successful. So for him to come in and set that standard, to set the tone and to raise the bar immediately, I thought was super impressive. And then that was also, I think, reflected in his comments that he made during his media availability as well. So just kind of compared to not only the first time head coaches the Blackhawks have had in the position since firing Quenneville, and obviously Jeremy Colleton and Luke Richardson being the full-time hires, Anders Sorensen and Derek King being the interims. Not only were those guys first-time NHL head coaches, but didn't really have like a ton of NHL assistant coach experience either, or just, again, being in that type of position at this level for a long time. Jeff Blashill brings that because he's been doing this as an assistant, as a head coach in this league for the last 10 years. And I just thought that's been super evident with how he's gone about things, making the guys work hard right from the get-go. Lots of conditioning drills to make sure these guys are in shape heading into the regular season. And listen, that's, 2.5 weeks away. There's not a whole lot of time to waste here or time to spare for Blashill to really dig his claws into the culture and, again, to set that tone. So I love that he wasted no time and got it going right from the opening day of Blackhawks training camp. And it's just been a welcome change of pace. And then also, when speaking with the media, in addition to just the intensity and the seriousness that he brings out there on the ice and how vocal he is as a leader, which again, I think are all great things, that was just reflected, I thought, really well in his media availability. There was a purpose, there was an intent with every statement he said. And listen, Luke Richardson was a serious, tough-nosed kind of guy as well, right? I'm not saying just because Blashill is doing these things means he's going to be a good head coach. But what I am saying is it's different. You can just feel the difference in the vibe, the difference in the level of intensity. And I feel like that's been reflected really well onto the players thus far. And they've been willing to work hard these first 2 days, willing to go through those conditioning battles with each other. And I love Blashill also saying, the group grows together the most. They come together when they go through these hard experiences as a whole. And Connor Bedard, after going through conditioning drills on Friday, was skating up and down the ice, dapping up every one of the guys who were, on all fours, huffing and puffing, gassed from these conditioning drills so early on in camp. But I thought not only was it a really good sentiment shared there by Blashill, and I really do believe it's true. I believe, going through hardships as a group together really does strengthen you and makes you want to strive for better things. I love to see that mentality reflected on the ice from Blashill, and again, received well by the players. And I also love to see Connor Bedard stepping up as a little bit of a leader there, dapping up his guys, being like, hell yeah, fellas, this is the level that we set every single day. We're going to go out there and work, and that's going to lead to better results on the ice. If they're putting in the work during practice like they have been, I know obviously it's going to be a young team once again. It's not a very deep roster, but it is shaping up to be a much more intriguing season for the Blackhawks. And I definitely think they have a lot more potential, not only with the players on the ice and the amount of talent they now have, but also because I think they do have a good head coach on their hands. Really impressed with what I've seen and what I've heard from Jeff Blashill so far, and super excited to see his impact on these guys when preseason action kicks off here next week. Like I said, though, not only did we hear from Blashill during a media session on Thursday, we also heard from general manager Kyle Davidson as well. And he first started with talking about some injury updates on a couple of players. First, got to talk about Laurent Brossoit, Blackhawks fans, because finally we know what's going on with Brossoit. Apparently, Brossoit underwent another surgery here this summer. I'm sure you remember the start of his Blackhawks tenure last fall, right around this time, had knee surgery. I believe it was on his meniscus. And then in either November or December of last year, he had to undergo another procedure to get a cleanup on his knee. Well, now, over the summer, he had to undergo hip surgery, making it 3 surgeries for Brossoit since signing with a contract with the Blackhawks in July of 2024. There is no official timetable on his return, but the Blackhawks are expecting him to have a long-term absence here. They're not expecting him to return anytime soon, although I will point out that Davidson did confidently say he expects Laurent Brossoit to continue his NHL career. He doesn't expect this to be a career-ending injury, but could be a Blackhawks 10-year-ending injury for Laurent Brossoit, as, again, he's going to be out for several months, which means Spencer Knight, Arvid Soderblom, that's going to be the 1-2 punch in net for the Hawks to open up the regular season. Ty Henry was the second member of the Blackhawks roster who was given an injury designation, suffered kind of a scary looking ankle injury when crashing into the boards hard last Thursday, just over a week ago now, when the Hawks were scrimmaging ahead of the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase. Tough update here for the 2024 6th-round pick, as Henry will have to undergo knee surgery, which I thought was an interesting development because at first it looked like an ankle injury, but it actually is a problem with his knee. Henry is going to have to undergo surgery. No official timetable on his return either, but expecting him to miss several months with the Erie Otters in the OHL, where he's set to play for the 25-26 season, hoping all the best for young defenseman Ty Henry. Those were the two injury updates that we got from general manager Kyle Davidson, but he also did share some thoughts and insight onto a couple of players leading into the start of the regular season that I wanted to touch on here as well real quickly, with one of them being Lukas Reichel. Davidson called this a, quote, make or break camp for Lukas, saying that he has to find that niche in the roster. It's not that different from any other player, but he has a history here with some highs and lows. But with the new coaching staff, it's an opportunity to reestablish himself, close quote. And it's kind of what I've been preaching here on the show these last couple of months. Does feel like a do or die kind of camp for Reichel and his future here with the Blackhawks. In just a second here in segment 2, I'll talk about where Blashill had him playing in terms of a quote unquote lineup or during line combinations in these opening couple of days. But yeah, it's a real tough spot for Lukas to be in. But when talking through some of the trade rumors that have popped up throughout the summer and again recently here in the last couple of weeks, I've personally said I don't expect Reichel to get traded, not only because the Blackhawks likely want an NHL player in return for him, and I just don't really see another club offering that at this point, and another like second, third round pick. It's not really going to be moving the needle for Kyle Davidson, considering the amount of second-round picks that he already has in the next 2 NHL drafts. And then again, like Davidson said, with a new coaching staff taking over, not only in Blashill, but Mike Vellucci's a new assistant. Michael Pekka's a new assistant as well. Anders Sorensen is really the only guy from last year who's sticking around, and he's more so going to be working with the defensemen. But I do think it is an opportunity for Reichel to have that fresh start and maybe get a different opportunity here this season, although I'm hard-pressed to believe it's going to come in the top 6, and if it's not going to be there, Reichel just has not meshed well in the bottom 6 so far in his young career, so it's just kind of hard to expect things to go differently. But at the same point in time, like I've said, trading Reichel right now and selling low for him, that wouldn't make a lot of sense to me either at this point in time. But hopefully Reichel can put together some good performances here in the preseason to maybe give this organization a different mindset around him entering the regular season. I also wanted to bring up how Davidson described how the team is going to be handling young players versus older guys here this season, because there is a good mix. We know there's returning guys like Ryan Donato, Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi, Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, Ilya Mikheyev, but there's also guys who are going to be pushing for NHL roster spots like Oliver Moore, like Ryan Green, Colton Dock, Landon Slaggert, right? And how both of those veterans and prospects alike are going to be handled was a very fascinating talking point coming into this camp. Well, Davidson made it clear that young guys, if they're proving their worth here, they're going to be getting their opportunities, saying, quote, if a young player is outperforming a veteran, the young player will get the opportunity, close quote. And I think that just makes sense with the type of season the Blackhawks are entering, right? It's all about the young guys. They are the top priorities. And if they're showing that they're ready, the Blackhawks should give them those chances, because these are the guys who could be future puzzle pieces, whereas the aging, returning veterans, yes, they're important to the team right here, right now, and also ushering the young players, showing them the ropes and how to go about things properly so we can reach our ultimate goal, but they're not at the forefront like those young players are. So I do think it makes sense for that to be the mentality around the team. If the young guys are proving that they deserve an opportunity, they're going to be receiving them, and I love to hear that. Last but certainly not least, wanted to talk about Matt Grzelcyk, of course, signed a PTO with the Blackhawks early last week, adding another interesting wrinkle to a crowded blue line as it already was. But now that Wyatt Kaiser, of course, has reached an agreement with the Blackhawks, does make it look harder for Grzelcyk to make the NHL roster. But as I kind of touched on when diving through my process of the PTO, my thought process, I should say, I did wonder, just because I expected Kaiser and the Hawks to reach a deal, and I also expect him to be part of their NHL group to open up the season, I felt like, well, it definitely could have been a move done to kind of show Kaiser, hey, look, if you don't want to sign this contract, but if you want to play hardball, we're just going to go and replace you with Matt Grzelcyk. That definitely could have been part of it, but I also do think Grzelcyk and his experience, considering Connor Murphy is the only elder skatesman on the Blackhawks blue line this year, I do think his experience could come in handy at a certain point. And I did wonder if he could potentially make the NHL roster if someone like Artem Levshinov isn't performing at the level the organization wanted to see here over these next couple of weeks. Well, that's kind of what Jeff Blashill reiterated when talking with the media yesterday. He said Grzelcyk will get a contract if some of the Blackhawks young D struggle in camp and look like they need more AHL time. Like Artem Levshinov, as I talked about, who I thought he had a good performance at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase, but he didn't dominate like Sam Rinzel did, and there were some hiccups along the way. And just because of that, I wondered if maybe the Blackhawks were considering Levshinov opening up the regular season in the AHL. Now, I also said what's going to happen during training camp in the preseason will be the ultimate determinator, but it does sound like that was at least on Kyle Davidson's mind when he gave Grzelcyk this PTO, because like I said, or like he said, if the Blackhawks young D, if some of them struggle in camp and look like they need AHL time, then Grzelcyk will be given a contract. But if they do look NHL ready, Grzelcyk probably won't be receiving a contract here from Chicago. So it's going to come down to how guys like Artem Levshinov, Ethan Del Mastro, probably less so Wyatt Kaiser, but he's still in that group, how those guys are going to look here over these next couple of weeks. And I did say, I think it is more likely that Artem Levshinov begins the year in the NHL than not. But the Blackhawks gave Matt Grzelcyk a PTO, I think, as a little bit of a backup plan there as well, in addition to potentially, twisting Kaiser's arm a little bit and getting him to reach this agreement before training camp opened up. But there are all the takeaways that I had from Jeff Blashill's first day of camp, as well as he and Kyle Davidson's press conferences. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'll get into some first look line combinations and defensive pairings that we've seen at Fifth Third Arena. But first, I do got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. With player props, same-game parlays, and now more ways than ever to get in on the action, are you ready to play? All you got to do is download the FanDuel app or visit FanDuel.com today in order to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app to place your first $5 bet and get $300 worth of bonus bets when it wins. Segment 2. We also got some first look forward line combinations and defensive pairings in the first 2 days of Blackhawks training camp as well. Definitely wanted to talk through this, even though obviously things can change over these next couple of weeks before the regular season begins, but sure looks like Jeff Blashill has an idea of some combinations and duos he wants to roll out there on Tuesday night against the Red Wings. First and foremost, we've known Connor Bedard was going to be in that top line center spot, but one of the key position battles that I alluded to on Thursday's episode that I dropped was who is going to get the first look on the top line wing positions. And I knew Ryan Donato was going to be there. That didn't surprise me to see him along with Bedard once again, considering the success they found together last year. Donato obviously had a career year, but that other wing spot between Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi, and Andre Burakovsky, I thought was the real mystery. And it looks like Blashill wants to give Burakovsky the first opportunity along with Bedard, which I do think makes some sense considering his goal scoring prowess. It's probably, even though we haven't really seen it the last couple of years in Seattle while he's been banged up and kind of been bouncing in between roles, I do think that is his best offensive asset, and he also moves really well for a player of his size. And again, I know it's only the first 2 days of training camp, but I thought Burakovsky looked pretty good in those first couple of practice sessions. I thought he was moving around really well, looking like one of the faster skaters on this NHL roster. And if he can play at that pace along with Bedard and kind of rekindle some of his offensive abilities that he's lost the last few years with the Kraken, I do think that's a really good spot for him to bounce back in, along with Ryan Donato, who provides good two-way play, crashes the net with a purpose, can score some easy tap-in goals like we saw last year from Bedard. So I do think altogether, while I probably would have preferred Teuvo Teravainen there, certainly understand Burakovsky getting a first look on the right wing along with Connor Bedard and Ryan Donato. We knew Frank Nazar also was going to be in the second line center role for the Blackhawks to open up the season right behind Connor Bedard, but who his wingers were going to be was a mystery as well. Obviously, though, with Burakovsky going up on the top line, that leaves Teuvo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi as the two wingers as of now who have been skating, at least with Nazar. I think Teravainen and his skill, in addition to his two-way play, will mesh really well along with Nazar, and in a similar ish mold to Donato on the top line with Connor Bedard. That's what Tyler Bertuzzi brings to the table on the second line here as well. Goes to the net with a purpose, scores those greasy goals, deflection type of goals. Doesn't really play in transition all that well, which I do think is why it's important for the coaching staff to give Nazar a high-paced option like Teuvo Teravainen on his line as well. So very interested to see how that trio is going to mesh should they stick together for that preseason opener on Tuesday against the Red Wings. The third line for the Blackhawks, fully expected Jason Dickinson to be there, fully expected Ilya Mikheyev to be there. That other wing spot, though, was going to be interesting to see who was going to get the first look. And it looks like it's going to Landon Slager, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I personally thought that was going to be either Oliver Moore or maybe someone like Colton Dach in that position. But Landon Slager is a third line fit as well with, he's not like he's not the fastest skater on the team, but for his size does move really well and provides pretty strong two-way play. I honestly see him as more of a fourth liner than a third liner, but good spot for him to kind of prove his case that he deserves a middle six opportunity to begin the regular season. And then down on the quote unquote fourth line as of now, that's where Colton Dach was given an opportunity along with Nick Foligno and Sam Lafferty. Foligno, Lafferty, Dickinson, Mikheyev, we know those guys are going to be in the NHL lineup in the bottom six come October 7th against the Florida Panthers. Those other two spots, those are the ones that are kind of up in the air for these young players to go and grasp. Looks like Slaggert and Dach are going to be given those opportunities first. And with Colton Dach's with his unique build, his size, and his physicality, I mean, look at the rest of the roster. There's not really anyone else who brings that mantra to the table. And that's why I kind of expected Dach to be given this opportunity early on in the season. We'll see if he goes and makes the most of it. And the next line that the Blackhawks have been rolling out, Oliver Moore, Ryan Green, and Lukas Reichel. And again, this goes back to Lukas Reichel being in kind of limbo with the Blackhawks organization. Probably should be in the spot where Landon Slaggert is if you're going to be having him on the NHL roster. Feel like he should be in the lineup, but again, like I've said, he hasn't done himself any favors with the lack of consistency he's provided in the bottom six, and also just his game doesn't mesh well with those type of roles. Landon Slaggert's game definitely fits well with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev. So once again, the Blackhawks don't seem to be giving Lukas Reichel a top six opportunity, which isn't all that surprising, but I do think it's a little surprising that he doesn't appear to be in their lineup whatsoever right now and is skating on a line with Oliver Moore and Ryan Green, who kind of appear to be on the outside looking in. Now, they both obviously have a chance to make the NHL roster if they perform well during the preseason, but it seems that Landon Slaggert and Colton Dach, two more experienced prospects, whereas Moore and Green are both entering their first full NHL seasons. Seems like the organization is giving them the opportunities first, but to put Lukas Reichel on a line with those two and kind of show that they're in that tweener stage right now, definitely a tough spot for Reichel to be in, and clearly shows that he's going to have to do something special these next couple of weeks to kind of change the opinion around him. Next line combination that we saw, Aiden Thompson, Dominic Toninato, Joey Anderson. That's a trio that will probably be, all three of those guys are expected to open up the regular season. Down in the AHL with the Rockford Ice Hogs, I do think it'll be fascinating to see, though, if Toninato or Anderson wind up being one of the extra forwards on the NHL roster, because the Blackhawks would more likely want to be healthy scratching those guys on a regular basis as opposed to someone like Oliver Moore or Ryan Green. Probably the role we're going to be seeing Lukas Reichel in as it appears right now when the regular season opens up. And then Marek Vanacker, Paul Ludwinski, and Nathan Bem, prospect line. Obviously, Ludwinski is already up at the professional level. Kind of a disappointing first season for him last year with the Rockford Ice Hogs as a former second-round pick. I really can't believe Paul Ludwinski once won, I think, 39th overall. Vanacker and Bem, two very likely candidates to go back to their junior clubs. Vanacker with the Brantford Bulldogs, who I'll be talking about here in just a moment, in the OHL, and then Nathan Bem in the WHL with the Kamloops Blazers. Defensively for the Blackhawks, I thought these pairings have been a little bit interesting out of the gate. Ethan Del Mastro and Sam Rinzel have been paired up with one another through the first 2 days. And as you could probably tell, the forward line combinations, the Blackhawks have been splitting into 2 or 3 groups for these opening days of camp. And they've mostly kept, guys who they want to be playing on a line together. They've put them in the same group. I found it interesting that Alex Vlasic and Sam Rinzel were playing in 2 different groups when I really feel like, or at least expected, Vlasic and Rinzel to open up the season as the top defensive pairing. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but did think it was noteworthy that Rinzel is starting with Ethan Del Mastro. Wyatt Kaiser has been skating with Artem Levshinov, which was, of course, the second pairing we saw for the Blackhawks late last season when I went through my way too early defensive pairing projections episode on the show like over a month ago now. That was the second pairing I had for the Blackhawks. Kaiser on that left-hand side, Artem Levshinov as the bigger of the 2 defensemen on the right-hand side. I talked in segment 1, if Levshinov doesn't really win the Blackhawks coaching staff over during the preseason, maybe we see Grzelcyk end up signing a contract with the Blackhawks and maybe he jumps into the top 6 here. But if Levshinov proves his worth, I expect him to be on the second pairing along with Wyatt Kaiser come October 7th. And Alex Vlasic has been skating with Connor Murphy here in these last couple of days, would provide, obviously a more experienced top pairing for the Blackhawks, with Murphy being the elder defenseman of the bunch. But again, I just expected it to be Vlasic and Rinzel, Del Mastro and Murphy down there as a pairing. But we'll see if that kind of changes over these next couple of weeks. Matt Grzelcyk has been skating with Louis Crevier, which I do think makes sense, right? Louis Crevier, expect him to be in that 7th defenseman role. Both of those guys NHLers at this point of their careers. Kevin Korchinski has been skating along with Nolan Allen, which I think is noteworthy because those are 2 guys likely opening up the season with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Looks like the Blackhawks are projecting it the same way. Dmitry Kuzmin's been with Tage Harding. Again, 2 guys who are going to begin the season in the AHL. And then same with Kevin Fitzgerald and Ryan Mast. So that's the way that Jeff Blashill has gone about his forward lines and defensive pairings through the first 2 days. Again, got to take this stuff with a little bit of a grain of salt. Things can definitely change before the regular season begins, but that at least gives us some insight into the coaching staff and the front office's mentality in terms of who they want to play with Connor Bedard, where they evaluate prospects against one another at this point of training camp. Gives us a good baseline for what we can expect to see here before the regular season begins against the Florida Panthers. But coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I close out today's episode, still got to get into the preseason OHL Power Rankings and which Blackhawks prospects are going to be playing for top clubs. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Can easily find Locked On NHL now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, a few prospects that are currently on the Blackhawks training camp roster, but probably aren't going to be hanging around for too much longer. Missed out on the OHL and the WHL regular season beginning in these last couple of days. But like I said, they're going to be returning to their respective teams probably in the next week or two. And basically all of them in the OHL specifically, all of these Blackhawks prospects that are going to be going back have a chance to win the OHL championship this season. Early last week, the OHL released its preseason power rankings, and I definitely wanted to go through it here on the show because coming in at number 1 in the OHL preseason power rankings is the Brantford Bulldogs, where we're obviously going to see 2024 first-round pick Merrick Vanacker in addition to 2025 fourth-round pick Parker Holmes. Vanacker, definitely the more noteworthy of the two, though. And he and Jake O'Brien truly might be the deadliest duo in the entire hockey league this season. Makes a lot of sense with both of those guys coming back why Brantford is atop these preseason power rankings. They had a real good chance to win the OHL championship last year until, unfortunately, Nick Lardis got hurt during the postseason. But Vanacker and Jake O'Brien are going to be two men on a mission for the Bulldogs here this year. Love to see them top the OHL power rankings. Then, coming in at number 2, is the Windsor Spitfires, where AJ Spellacy is likely going to be playing this season since it's NHL or OHL for him. Not expected to see that AHL 119-year-old rule change come into effect this season. Spellacy, by the way, has not skated during the opening days of training camp yet as he is dealing with a shoulder injury, and Davidson said he's going to be out 7 to 10 days. Think that stemmed from the second game that the Blackhawks had at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase last weekend, but doesn't seem to be anything too serious. Just feels like they're being precautionary here with Spellacy. But Liam Greentree, potentially Ilya Protash as well. I mean, could be a dominant squad for the Windsor Spitfires, who were one of the top teams in the OHL last year. And then coming in at number 3 was the Kitchener Rangers, where Jack Pridham is going to be returning to be a huge focal point of the Rangers offense. Was arguably the most impactful player on the team last year after joining them once after he started the season in the BCHL. I'm expecting some real big things out of Jack Pridham, who, like Spellacy, was not on the ice for the opening day of Blackhawks training camp due to an infection, but was healthy enough to go and make an appearance on Friday morning. So Merrick Vanacker, Parker Holmes, and the Brantford Bulldogs coming at number 1. AJ Spellacy and the Windsor Spitfires come in at number 2, and then Jack Pridham and the Kitchener Rangers come in at number 3. 4 Blackhawks prospects expected to play for top OHL teams this season. Should be a lot of fun to follow. Also want to mention, not quite as highly regarded are the Erie Otters, where we know Ty Henry is expected to play this year will have to undergo knee surgery. I don't know if that's going to force him to miss the entire of the regular season, but Erie was ranked 15th out of the top 16 teams in the OHL to begin the regular season. Now that Matthew Schaefer looks likely to be an NHLer right out of the gate, they're not really expected to do big things here in the 25-26 season. Again, we'll see if Ty Henry winds up suiting up for the Otters at all here this season, but Jack Pridham, AJ Spellacy, and Merrick Vanacker, 3 prospects who, knock on wood, we know are going to be healthy, playing for their teams, have a good chance of winning the OHL championship. Like I said, should be a lot of fun to watch. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes. Until the next show, Blackhawks fans, enjoy the rest of your weekends. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.